Hey everybody, just finished an amazing episode with Greg Lawrence. He's a psychedelics integration coach. So he's going to talk to you about how you can use psychedelics to just radically transform your life and how to do it properly, right? You want to use psychedelics as a tool that can actually really make changes in your life. So it takes some intentionality, and he really walks you through step by step on how to do that. And he also shares some of the profound insights that he's had on his journey using plant medicine. All right, please enjoy.
All right, welcome to the podcast, Greg Lawrence. So, Greg Lawrence is a psychedelic integration coach. Before, instead of me introducing him, Greg, can you just introduce us to the audience and anything that you feel is relevant?
Sure. I'm a psychedelic integration and transformational coach. Psychedelic integration coach, for people who don't know, is someone who works with a person before and or after a psychedelic experience that they have some intention around it, usually, like they come for healing or personal or spiritual growth. We'll have some intention. So beforehand, we prepare. We talk about harm reduction, what may or may not happen, how to set intentions. And afterwards, we help the person sort of process their experience and connect that up with the intention. So there are a lot of different ways of working. I'm an NLP master practitioner, an HNLP master coach, a certified psychedelic integration coach, certified life coach. And I've been a faculty or guest faculty member on 4 different psychedelic integration coach certification programs and one psychedelic facilitator program.
Cool. So you're deep in the psychedelic world. And yeah, so what's
Involved
your
psychedelic
story?
for about 8 years now.
8 years. Wow.
Yeah.
And what's your story? How did you end up getting into this work?
Well, to tell you that, I have to back up to my late teens and late 20s. And during that time, I took quite a bit of psychedelics along with anything else that could alter myself, my consciousness. I didn't understand at the time, but I was really trying just not to feel what I was feeling. But in my late 20s, I got mixed up in hard drugs. So I fortunately got pulled out of the physical place where I was living. I moved away and cut ties with all the people that I had known. Um, I went out and got a job, and I stopped using all substances except for cannabis, which I abused for about 20 years. And I lived, like a suburban lifestyle. I started a business, bought a home, a family. And about 10 years ago, that all got like turned upside down. My life really fell apart. And in the midst of that, I realized that there was a lot of childhood trauma that I had never even looked at, let alone addressed in any way. So I started working with a therapist. I was working with a coach. And at the time, I smoked cigarettes. And I told my coach, I'm going to try to stop smoking. And he said, "Oh, I read a study that said psilocybin helps with that." And I thought, well, I know about mushrooms. I took them before. So I found some mushrooms and I took them. And I discovered the power of intention because when I had taken psychedelics before, I was looking outside of myself. And that's where the experiences were. Now that I had turned my attention inward, that's where the experience went. And I
Mm,
didn't quit smoking that night, but I saw all of the things that happened in my life and my part, other people's part, problems they had caused me, the kind of patterns I kept repeating as a result. And when I was done, I thought, now that I've seen all of that, everything's going to be different. And in about 2 weeks, it was all the same again.
mm.
So rinse, repeat a couple of times. I kept having these epiphanies and insights and realizations, and I couldn't understand why my life wasn't changing as a result. So I started looking around and I found out there was this thing called psychedelic integration, which I had never heard of. I'd been away from more than 20 years. And I found a psychedelic integration circle, which is a safe space where people go to share experiences and find support, build community. And when I was there, I heard a lot of people with a lot of different ideas about what integration was and what to do. And I tried a lot of what people were saying, and it wasn't working for me. So I started looking into how to create new habits and how to actually make changes in your life and sort of started my own integration program. And that's when things started changing for me. And about that time, they asked me, they said, "Hey, you're always at these integration circles. I'm not going to be here next week. Why don't you facilitate it?" So I started facilitating like every other integration circle. And as a result, people were coming to me and asking me questions about psychedelics. I was doing sort of counseling. I thought, well, I should know what I'm doing. So I got certified as a psychedelic integration coach. At the time, I had my own business and I was getting this coaching work and I was kind of pushing it away like, I'm trying to do my job. I don't have time for this. And pretty soon it reached a critical mass where I could switch over and make that my job. And that's what I did. Got out of my
Yeah.
business, started working as a coach. I've been doing that almost 6 years now in private practice. But I do this because this is what helped me. So I endeavor to be the help that I was looking for when I was looking for help.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. And yeah, I am a really big believer in psychedelics, plant medicine. And I think, some people their view is a bit tainted because when they think of psychedelics like mushrooms, maybe the first picture is like some kids or something, some really young people just taking mushrooms, very very recreationally, and that can be fine too. That can be fun and all. But can you share that distinction between recreational use and what that looks like versus using it as a more intentional medicine?
Well, I'm like you. I don't have any problem with so-called recreational use. I call it celebratory use. And I forget which friend, but I stole that from a friend of mine. Because in my opinion, if someone wants to put something into their body or alter their consciousness, as long as they're not hurting themselves or someone else, that's fine with me. People should have that autonomy. And I believe in cognitive liberty. But there is a difference between taking a substance to just enjoy the world around you, another person's body or food or a movie or music or whatever it is you want to do, nature, go outside, and doing it for a specific purpose. And people come to this work, you might call it, for a lot of different reasons. A lot of people have generalized or social anxiety. A lot of people are sort of having existential crises like I don't know what this is about. What am I doing in my life? They feel like they're at a crossroads. Some people have questions that they want answered. And some
Yeah.
people actually have like chronic conditions that they're thinking this might help with, which often does. Psychedelics can have anti-inflammatory effects that don't usually last very long, but can help someone. And they can also help someone on the road to recovery from chronic conditions, helping them sometimes get off of medications or get better habits in their life and so forth. And then
Mhm.
there are people who come for reasons like I worked with a couple of people who came to this work because they had terminal illnesses
Mhm.
and they wanted to get a peek of what might happen on the other side, or at least take a look at their lives before they passed into the next one.
Wow. So there's a kind of a wide range of intentions or use cases
Wide
you
range
can
of
have.
intentions and a wide demographic of all ages and all backgrounds.
Mm, beautiful. And I'm curious, what were some of your journeys with the medicine and some of your intentions, or some of the ones that you feel were most profound?
Well, I've worked with a lot of different kinds of psychedelics, but overall they've helped me to be more at peace with myself, to not focus so much on the past, to forgive myself and others, and to realize that there's not as much cause effect in the world as I thought. I used to think that a lot of things were making me upset or happening to me. And really, that's just a matter of something happening and me getting upset at the same time. One is not
Mm,
caused by the other. There's no physical connection there.
mm,
But
yes.
there are a couple things at play there. One is that we have normalized the idea of things making us upset or making us a certain way when that's not really what happens. And the other is that there's a tendency of our brain to notice when things happen in close connection and then to think that those things go together. There are a lot of things that
Right.
happen like that in life, but my upset at someone's actions are certainly one of those things. But
Mm,
realizing that I have a lot more license in this existence than I thought I had is largely due to my work with psychedelics and the work that's been done afterwards, because you can do a lot of work with psychedelics, and if you don't take some action in the aftermath, you won't have the same impact. That's
right.
what happened to me first, and that's how I got here, because you can see the exact moment that a trauma occurred to you and what it caused to happen in you, but that
Mhm.
doesn't affect the reaction that you have. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Some have to do with our nervous system and other things, but if you're not doing anything about that in the aftermath,
Mm,
um, then you're not making the progress that you might make. I think
yeah,
someone once said, if you're taking psychedelics all the time, you're not becoming a nicer person, then you're kind of wasting an opportunity.
totally. Yeah. Yeah, I see psychedelics as a plant medicine as a tool to give you insights, give clarity, like you said, maybe you can find where that trauma came from or have a specific insight that needs to be changed. But the real work is done after, of like how do you actually embody that after or integrate it. I also see people that they kind of get glimpses of what they believe is like consciousness or God, and it brings them some peace for a few days. Because it just happened, so it's like fresh in the memory. But they didn't really make any changes in their mindset or the way they behave from that, and then very quickly they just go back into a fear mode. I've had just even recently a friend that experienced that, where he used to be very scared of death, and after he took the mushrooms, he felt he had a deeper understanding of what God was and the eternity of things, and he was very at peace with death for a few days. But then his old mindset just came back in, and now he's kind of again just kind of driven by this fear of death. And yeah, I think it's because he didn't have a way to kind of integrate those insights, you know, how to make it more practical. So how would you? So let's say somebody is coming to you. What would the process be like? Starting, I imagine, is with setting an intention. How would you guide them like through the journey, and then what would the integration process look like? And let's maybe use an example. Let's say somebody wants to do something related on improving their confidence, letting go of social anxiety. How would you guide them there?
Well, the first thing to do is to, you know, see what it is you want from the medicine and to try to state that plainly and clearly, a simple sentence in the positive. So you don't say, I don't want to be anxious anymore. And the reason for that is that your unconscious mind doesn't process negatives as easily as positives. Sometimes it just skips over them. So that might
Mm,
sound like, I want to be anxious. The second is that when you say something linguistically, you're sort of painting a picture for yourself. When you say, I don't want to be anxious, what you end up with is sort of a picture of you being anxious and then
right,
moving away from that. So
right,
recreating that picture over and over again. And, our brains don't know much difference between what's happening and what we're imagining, which is why
right,
worry can be corrosive. There was
yeah,
a study done where they took a group of basketball players and broke them up into three groups. They told the first group, I want you guys to practice free throws every day for 90 minutes for 2 weeks.
mhm,
Second group, I want you to imagine that you're practicing free throws every day for 90 minutes for the next 2 weeks, but don't go on the basketball court. And the third group, I don't want you to think about basketball or go on the basketball court. Now, the people who practice free throws improve by something like 6%. The people who imagine practicing free throws improve by 3%. So
mhm,
the mere act of imagining something, you can actually build muscle mass by doing that. There are studies where they had people imagine doing exercise and their muscle mass increased.
yeah,
So seeing something as happening is not good for your brain. So when you see yourself in a bad habit and say, I don't want to do that anymore, you're just
right,
recreating that picture and showing your brain that that's happening right now.
yeah.
So intention should always be stated in the positive. They
So
should be to
something
speak.
more of like, I want to be more confident or more free, more authentic.
I want, I want to be as confident as I'd like to be. I've been anxious long enough. You know, I'm through being this way. I'm going to start this way. I'm going to do everything that I can to accomplish X, Y, or Z. I'm going to have a goal I work towards daily of being or doing. Things like this are very good ways to set intentions. And they set you up to feel like you're starting on something, not like it has to be done. I am working towards, I am in the process of. These are all good things because you don't fail by not being that way right away. You're always in the process of doing that because one thing about personal spiritual growth is we're always going to have drops. We're going to make progress and then we're going to screw up. We're
Yeah,
going to make progress and we're going to screw up. It looks like this from across the room, but when you zoom in, you can see you go up, then you go down, and you go up a little higher and you go down. But people usually get sort of despondent in these downs and they think that, they've ruined all the progress they've made and beat themselves up about it. So if you see yourself in the process of doing something, it can be a little bit more encouraging of seeing yourself attaining that goal that might take weeks or months or years.
yeah.
It's
kind of
intention.
the roller
We also
coaster of
need to
life.
prepare someone in the preparation phase. We also need to let them know that they may get very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of controversy for some reason around the idea of bad trips. But when you go to one of these government funded studies that they're doing around psychedelics, the research that's being done, the therapist there will often ask a question that's something like this. I would like you to imagine the least favorite psychological state that you've been in for the last 6 months and ask yourself if you're willing to have that amplified 5 to 10 times. If the answer is no, you probably should not take part in this study because it's a distinct possibility. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I do agree when people say even a bad trip can lead to a good outcome, but that doesn't mean that at the time you're experiencing it, it's not something that's bad and very uncomfortable because psychedelics can take you back to the worst thing that's happened in your life so that you can process it. That's just
All
what
right.
it does. They're also largely feeling and emotion generators. So if I have a lot of emotion X stuck inside of me, that substance is going to try to make me feel that so it can get out of me. And that can be very, very uncomfortable, especially when you don't understand what's happening. So, in harm reduction and preparation, we let people know that you can get very uncomfortable. And the best thing you can do is just write it out and don't try to stop it because that's where things really get messed up sometimes. You can't stop a feeling that's already been felt any more than you can stop a thought that's already being thought. So,
Mm-hmm.
these are the kind of things we go over in preparation. Now,
Yeah.
in my job as an integration coach, I'm not with the person when they're going through the journey. That's something they do on their own or as part of a ceremony or facilitator or something. I come into the picture after they've had the experience.
Mm-hmm. I'm
After
curious,
they've had the
just touching on bad trips. I think that's a big reason people are scared to do, plant medicine, because they're scared that they'll have a bad trip. And yeah, my belief also is that in order to heal these things, I mean, really deep healing is really just about feeling the experience, feeling whatever wasn't processed in the past, and just having the opportunity to feel it now. But so, what would you say to people that are, scared that they're interested in plant medicine, but they're scared of having a bad trip?
well, I tell them that's a distinct possibility. And if they don't want to have that, psychedelics aren't for everyone.
Right.
Um, that I make clear up front with everyone too. Psychedelics are not for everyone. They don't help everyone and they don't fix everything. There's some idea that everyone in the world should do psychedelics because then it'll be a better world. But honestly, there are white supremacists who do psychedelics and it strengthens their worldview. It shows them that white people should be in control. So your intention is a large part of what happens with psychedelics. You can't just give psychedelics to bad people and expect them to turn out good. And people who are really worried about having a bad trip might have an even harder time because of that fear. So I could
Right.
tell them to seriously consider that and ask them whether or not they're prepared for that to happen. Because if they're
Yeah.
praying for it not to happen, like maybe it won't happen, that's probably not a good way to go in.
Right. They're going to be focused on it.
Right.
Yeah. So you would really say that, yeah, at the end of the day, it's their decision, and there has to be a willingness to be okay with facing potential discomfort and seeing
Yeah.
that as a possibility.
I mean, you don't
Yeah.
know what's going to happen when you get there, but people should know
Right.
that that's a distinct possibility.
Right. And then so you're not there during the ceremony, during the trip. Is there any guidance you give people on during the trip, like maybe beforehand, like any tips on what to do? Like, let's say if they're uh, doing it by themselves, for example, what's some advice you'd give them?
Well, if they've never done it before, I strongly advise them to be with a sitter of some kind. It doesn't have to be a
Mhm.
guide or facilitator, but someone should be
Yeah.
around just to make sure that you're okay and that you're comfortable. Maybe you need a hand to hold, you need to know somebody's there, but if you haven't done it before, I definitely recommend a sitter.
Yeah.
But I do recommend that people take up a meditation practice because meditating when if something is unpleasant, meditating can help you sit through that just like it does when you are meditating also teaches you to just watch things go by, and it's not something you can always do in the moment during a psychedelic journey because we forget things. But I also teach them about breathing, um, things like watching your breath. If you breathe out twice as long as you breathe in, you'll generally calm down a little bit.
Mhm.
But one of the biggest thing people should know is that if they feel like they're going to go crazy or they're going to die or fall off of a cliff. They should go ahead and go crazy or die or fall off of a cliff, because those are just points at which something inside of you has determined you shouldn't go any further. And it feels like you can't. And it's very frightening. But what happens is something like this. Something happens to me a long time ago. It's traumatic. It was very difficult for me. And something inside, like my unconscious mind, steps in and says, you know what, that was really bad. Like you almost died. You didn't, but that's what it thinks. So I'm just
Mm,
going to make sure that you don't come over here again. You don't get to this point. And when you start getting close to that, your brain will come up with some reason why you can't do that, like you're going to die or go crazy. And if
mm,
you go ahead and die or you go ahead and go crazy, you'll get past that point.
mm,
So people who are psychologically stable enough to take psychedelics without worry. So people with bipolar disorder, people with a history of psychosis, those people should use extreme caution around psychedelics, because people with bipolar disorder can end up in manic episodes. And
mm,
people who have a history of psychosis or schizophrenia don't need to be further untethered from reality. Most of us need to
mm,
be a little bit untethered from reality because we're stuck on it. People with psychosis or schizophrenia are already a little bit untethered. They don't need to be untethered more. It can push them over the edge. But people who are
mm,
psychologically stable, who have that experience of it feels like I'm going to die, or there's a monster there, or there's a dark room, something you feel like you can't go towards, you should go toward that thing. And that's
mm.
also what they'll tell you in just about every one of the research studies that's going on, that that is the thing that will result sometimes in profound healing. You go into that space that you thought you couldn't go to before, because if you
Yeah.
walk into the dark room, eventually the light will come on. If you walk up to the monster, you'll see it's just a person. And if you fall off the cliff, you're going to see that you're really flying, you're not falling.
Yeah. So there's going to
And
be a
if you,
part of your mind really kind of resisting it because it's
absolutely,
linked so much, fear and pain to it. So it wants to keep you away from it. But really, the healing is it being able to embrace it, and then ultimately finding out that it was actually something you can handle.
absolutely, yeah. That's
And
when
then
it turns out it's going to, it generally feels like it's too much and you can't take it. And just when it gets to the point where you can't take it anymore, things just sort of open up.
yeah, I always find, especially I've done a few ayahuasca ceremonies, and there's always challenging. At least for my ceremonies, there's always been challenging parts, but it's always the most love, joy, and peace is always after going through those
Mhm.
those challenge those challenging parts. And what would you like? What advice would you give? If people are facing that, is it would you just say the same thing of just breathe and try to relax? Is there any
You mean if
type of
people feel like they're going to die during the experience?
yeah? If they're having a difficult time and they feel getting very intense, they're scared, they feel like they might die.
Really,
Is
the
there
best
any
thing you could,
thoughts they can like any mantras they can tell themselves or something?
well, sometimes mantras might help. Sometimes it helps to remember that you just took a substance,
Mhm.
that there is a
Right.
substance in your body that's altered your consciousness, and that nothing's different than it was before, that there's no actual physical danger. But one of the best things you can do is to surrender. And
Right.
that just means to completely and totally let go and relax. Because if you are completely and totally relaxed in every part of your body, it's impossible to feel tension or anxiety. Something in you somewhere, when you don't feel good, is tightened somewhere. You're holding on somewhere. So if you can imagine, when you feel these things during a psychedelic experience, you can check in and see where it is in your body, and if you can relax that.
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Could be in your neck, shoulders, could be in your, a lot of people hold in their stomach, could be your legs, but just check and see where are you tightened and holding, and see if you can let that relax. And that's very difficult to do when you're in a very uncomfortable position in a psychedelic
Yeah.
journey sometimes. But
Totally.
it's the thing that you can do, because when you do that, you kind of let the trauma out of that part of your body and let a little bit of healing in.
Yeah. Which is why you mentioned that, yeah, meditation is such a good practice. Doing it before, but also just having a regular meditation practice, you kind of learn the skill of being able to relax, even when there's tension, and bring, presence and awareness to what's there. So, and for me, meditation has also been a main part of my integration process. But okay, so going back to, so they have the trip, expect that some things could potentially go bad, but usually these difficult times is the best healing opportunities, and really just have to surrender, relax into it, um, and kind of trust the process. What next? As they're experiencing that, maybe they get some insights, maybe they see some things. What would you advise them next?
You mean after the experience?
Yeah, or like as they're coming down from the experience.
Well, as you're coming down from the experience, I mean, it's good. It's always good just to feel these things in your body.
Okay.
Um, Thinking them in your head is helpful, but that's only half the story. You know, your body only knows how to be in here and now. So, feeling any healing you might get in your body is helpful. If you
Mm,
have come up with anything that's unusual, like a novel thought, sometimes it's good to make a note of that. But what's really going to, it's really important to remember afterwards that um, sometimes it may feel like you may feel elated at the experience you had. Sometimes you may feel disappointed that you've come back to normal life. But whatever's happening with you in the aftermath, that's still the medicine showing you something. And this includes in the days following the experience.
mm,
Everything that's happening to you is sort of an amplification of things that are happening inside of you already. And it's the medicine showing you that.
mm. Okay, so yeah, staying very kind of focused even after you're coming down, and just yeah, seeing everything after the trip too as like a filter of what the medicine might be showing you.
Yeah, and just noticing things, just noticing. I mean,
Yeah,
the best things you can do in any situation is just to notice your thoughts.
right. Just be mindful.
Yeah.
And do you recommend people like journal, write these things down, write down these insights? Because otherwise, people maybe could forget some of the things that they saw.
I write things down, but I wouldn't count on having things written down. Sometimes people write things down and they think that you'll just go back and read those later. And the effect that those things have on you during the experience is a lot more profound than they will ever have on you when you go back and read them later. It's valuable to have
Yeah,
those things around, but then you need to do something with them.
right. And what does that look like? They have the experience, and then yeah, how would you help somebody to actually integrate that and do something with it?
Well, it depends on what it is. Sometimes it's strictly a matter of changing habit, but changing a habit can be very bad because, well, let's say I'm right handed. If I put my pen in my left hand, first of all, it feels awkward and I'm not sure what to do with it. And really, my brain is kind of telling me to put it back in my right hand. It
Mhm.
feels uncomfortable. It's because your brain is programmed to automate things and have you do things the same way over and over again for survival reasons. Our brains are still stuck in 15,000 years ago. So
Right.
your brain automates things and it wants you to do things the same way. And when you vary from that, it will make you uncomfortable in your body. It seems like that feeling of discomfort is a thought in my head, but really it's discomfort in my body that's happening right now.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
next part of this is that's a new neural pathway. This is writing. And if I start writing, I've fired together writing and left hand, which don't usually go together, but it's not going to stay. If I don't keep practicing writing, that neural pathway is just going to fade away. So a lot of people think that after a psychedelic experience that neuroplasticity is just going to happen, like your brain is going to form all kinds of new connections. But if you don't make those connections stick and strengthen them, they won't stay with you. So in order to form a new habit, I need to do something differently. I need to understand that it's going to be uncomfortable, and I need to understand that that discomfort's only going to away if I keep repeating it over and over and over again, just like I did whatever I was doing before. Your
Right.
brain will always make change uncomfortable for you. So, whatever we're doing in the aftermath, that is part of it. We may do something with NLP techniques. We may just do regular old habit formation. We may have people set boundaries or communicate in a different way. There's always something that someone can do internally or externally that makes some change or shift in their environment.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you have a psychedelic experience and things just aren't quite the same anymore. But a lot of times, if you just go back to the same habits and patterns and ways of being and thinking that you were in before, you'll just be in the same routine again.
Right. So it's important to kind of condition these new neural pathways. And for people that just aren't familiar with neuroplasticity and neural pathways, can you just explain that a little bit first and just share how psychedelics affect that?
And neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to change, to actually
Hmm.
structurally change, and make new connections and do things differently. Now, psychedelics often increase the chemical environment that helps neuroplasticity. So, in the aftermath of a psychedelic experience, it can be much easier or smoother to form new habits and patterns, ways of being and thinking. But if we don't keep doing it consistently, it just won't stick. So, a neural
Hmm.
pathway is just the two things that fire together when I do something. So, I look at you and I talk, that's a neural pathway. Everything I do is there's a neural pathway. There's two neurons clicking together. And the more I do it, the stronger that connection gets. It will actually structurally change. It will get bigger. You can see it in a PET scan. If you measure someone's brain, if they keep doing something, it's exactly like exercising your arm. If you
Hmm.
ask me, how do you get your bicep bigger? Well, you have to do curls, you have to pick up weights, you have to exercise your arm. How do I form a new habit? You have to keep doing that thing over and over. That is your mental muscle. So, neural pathways are like mental muscles. The more you do something, the stronger that neural pathway gets. The less you get, the weaker it gets. And it can atrophy and actually become sort of obsolete after a while. When you go from one habit to another, make this one stronger, sometimes that one gets weaker.
Yeah. So after a psychedelic journey, our minds are really in a prime state for change. Neuroplasticity is at a heightened level, so people can really use that as an opportunity to start, making actual changes, like new behaviors, maybe new thought patterns, new beliefs. But it's important that people, I guess, do that intentionally. They think about the new changes they want to make, and then start actually acting it out, or doing it, having those beliefs after the journey. And how long does that neuroplasticity last for? Like how the heightened level of neuroplasticity?
Well, depending on the substance, for some of them, it can last for, a matter of 5, 6 weeks. That
Mm.
neuroplasticity can be there. But even during that time, your brain will still make it uncomfortable for you to change. You
Right.
won't be just automatically jumping into a new habit because of neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is going to make it a little bit easier to cement that in after a
Right.
psychedelic experience,
Oh,
but
yes.
you're still going to be uncomfortable and you're not going to like doing it. And that discomfort doesn't always show up bodily, although that's where it starts. It shows up as thoughts. Things like,
Hmm.
this isn't a good time, or we'll start this tomorrow. Well, those are some of the two most common things. This isn't a good time for this.
Hmm.
You know, if someone is, let's say that someone wants to be closer to their spouse. After a psychedelic experience, they might say, you know what, I'm going to tell my wife every day how much I love her. And they'll do that for about 4 or 5 days. And then about sixth day, they look at them and say, you know what, she's kind of busy and I told her before, so she already knows. So the resistance that you get to change can show up in things like indifference or thoughts of, this isn't really important. I'll do it later. It doesn't come as full on resistance that you can recognize and say, here's that resistance. I'm going to work through it. Resistance comes through your brain, and your brain knows what buttons to push. So it'll give you all kinds of reasons why this is not a good time or place to make this change. And that's something you have to be prepared for as well.
Mm. Yes. It's a great distinction that your brain will be in a heightened level of neuroplasticity, but it doesn't mean it's going to feel good to make these changes. With any type of
Absolutely. It
change, there's
usually doesn't.
discomfort. Yeah.
Yeah, it's your brain's job to make sure that you don't change. It thinks it would be a very bad idea because
Yeah.
um, it's still stuck, like I said, 15,000 years ago. We've evolved as a species much more quickly than our brains have. It
Right.
takes our brains thousands and tens of thousands of years sometimes to evolve and adapt. Well, if you look at the way that we lived 500 years ago, it's quite different than how we do now. The dangers
Yeah.
we face on a daily basis and the ease of which we can survive for the most part, quite different than it was 500 years ago, let alone 5,000 years ago.
Mm. Yeah. Like our brains they want you to continue being the same way because it got you to survive. So it doesn't want you to try something new where
Yeah,
there's a
your
new
brain thinks
variable.
there's not a lot of resources. There's a lot of competition. There's going to be cold pretty soon. You're going to have to eat more fruit to put on weight so you don't starve. And you cannot waste a calorie changing the way that you do things.
Right. So yeah, having that expectation that, as you try to change these things, there's still going to be the normal resistance. That's not going to be any different. But also seeing that you are going to be in a heightened level of neuroplasticity. So when you actually do make the changes, you're going to be able to kind of ingrain these neural pathways and condition them a bit faster than if you hadn't taken psychedelics.
Probably a bit faster, but it's still going to take a lot of repetition.
Right.
It's
So yeah.
conditioning. It's just
So
classical
yeah,
conditioning.
yeah. So still be ready to do the process of any type of change, which takes repetition and consistency, and there is going to be some discomfort when you make the change. So I guess that's really helpful for somebody to see ahead of time, to expect that. And especially I think after a psychedelic journey, there's people are in this heightened level of kind of energy and motivated. So that is probably a great time to create this kind of plan of the changes they want to do. And also seeing, while they're making the plan, just seeing that, or being aware that this heightened level of motivation or energy is going to dip, and being ready for that, and still having the commitment to follow through on that new plan, even when that motivation drops.
No, absolutely.
And I guess, is that something you probably help people with, in order to, as they kind of reach that stage of where they're not getting maybe as excited about this new change anymore, you're kind of there to help them, hold them accountable and consistent? Is that part of what you do?
Yeah, maybe just to remind them about what's happening. There's some things that you can do, with NLP and HNLP to help those things be a little bit easier. But what I mentioned before about having peaks and valleys is people are going to get discouraged when. Well, I was on a panel once with a couple of other integration coaches. I'll never forget. One of them was asked a question, and the question was, "What do you say to a client who is discouraged because they've fallen back into old habits and patterns, and they think that's ruining their integration process?"
Hmm.
And he said, "What I would tell them is that falling back into old habits and patterns is not ruining their integration process. Them thinking that they're ruining their integration process is ruining their integration process." So it's you know, once again, your brain's uh, mission is to make sure that you don't change. So as soon as you make any slip at all, it starts telling you that you just erased all of those gains. And you're going back to, why even start now? You just screwed up. Don't even bother again. You'll never change. It starts with all of those thoughts. And it's necessary in those times to have a recovery strategy. So
Hmm.
now you're in a world of hurt and you're really discouraged, and maybe you're having a lot of negative thoughts, and you think that you've erased all of the progress you made. Now's the time to pull yourself together and realize, okay, I need to drop all of that and just move forward. I
Yeah.
can't let that stop me.
Yeah.
That's just being informed that those thoughts are going to come up, that this is no use, this isn't a good time, we'll do it later, see it's not working, all the things you might say. And that's when you realize those are just thoughts popping up. And if you listen to those thoughts will lead to feelings, which will keep you from moving forward.
Hmm.
But if you're
Yeah.
able to stop and just notice that those thoughts in your brain are no different than clouds in the sky, they're just things going by, and that thoughts will always arise, but you don't have to think about them, you'll be much further ahead.
Yeah. I think this is why it can be so helpful having, integration coach like you, because you've kind of seen these patterns of what people can fall into, these the pattern of thinking that they've lost their results, and then that actually makes the process harder, or makes them actually start going backwards even more. But just kind of letting people know, like, this is normal, this is a pattern and to be expected, and here's the way to deal with it.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah. See that being very helpful. Awesome. Well, I think we covered a lot about how to set intention, some tips on taking the medicine, and especially if somebody is doing it for the first time, having a sitter. Yeah, I also believe is great. And yeah, how to integrate this into their life. I'm curious. I'll just love to hear some of your experiences. Well, one question I'm always deeply curious about, and where most of my thoughts or my kind of life is moving towards is just understanding consciousness more, understanding life, God, everything. So I'm just very curious, through your journeys, what has been your experience with understanding what is?
Well, I think that, it's partly from journeys, but also partly from, I think that I lean more towards the work of like Donald Hoffman, who is someone who's involved in quantum physics. And
Okay.
his view is that consciousness is fundamental, that consciousness does not arise from something physical like the brain or even the universe, that consciousness is all that there is, and that everything physical is a product of consciousness. So I believe that everything is part of a universal consciousness. Everything, in my opinion, has to come from somewhere. It all has to start somewhere. So in some way, shape, or form, we come from the same place, or you could say the same thing. In my opinion, that thing, which has gone by many names, is all there is, was, and ever will be. And
Mhm.
people have called that God before, but I believe that that thing is recreating itself over and over again to experience itself and the physical world it created. It's done that in the form of you and I. So we are experiencing the world as these individuals, but we're really part of all that there is. And the interesting thing about that is, if that is true, that means we're all having the exact same experience, but in a very different way, which is kind of the point.
Mhm.
And having that experience like that means that the differences are kind of the point. They're the thing that makes things interesting. The differences between you and I are the things that stand out, and the things that we notice, and the things that we can appreciate. The differences are also things that we see as separators. But if we're all having the same experience, but in a very different way, then we really can't be separates anytime. We can experience a separation, but we can't ever be separated from all there is, was, never will be.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
that's something that I have um, taken in, say, in waking consciousness, and I've definitely experienced during psychedelic experiences or meditation.
Mm.
Something
Beautiful.
I can feel to be true inside of me. So
Yeah.
it's true for me.
And you feel it also during meditation.
Sure.
Mm. Beautiful.
Sometimes we meditate in a certain way. And the same thing that happens in a psychedelic journey happens is when you meditate, that is, the default mode network of the brain, the part that holds me, that tells me, holds all the memories and has created the narrative that I'm Greg. That thing quiets down. It never shuts off, but it quiets down a lot. When that happens, I get to experience more than just being Greg.
Mm. Yes. Beautiful. That's very similar to my beliefs on what consciousness, God is. It's just this formless thing that is everywhere, and that also all form comes from. It's, to be honest, not something I haven't actually experienced that in any of my psychedelics journeys. Probably because I've always had very specific intentions, which has been great, because I always get exactly what I wanted with every intention I've had. But I've never
Mhm.
actually went into a journey with just a more open kind of question of like wanting to understand everything. I get those experiences more from meditation, or at least I'm starting to feel glimpses of it. This connectedness, I feel my own energy body, and I can, then feel my energy body in like the whole room, and sometimes like not differentiate myself between, anything there is. And I'll also, just one thing with that too is like my belief is that psychedelics can be great it can show you these things of like what consciousness is, what everything is, and you can have that experience for glimpses of it. But I feel meditation is like the way to embody it.
Mm.
Because when you meditate, you're practicing this, what I believe is just awareness. Um, and with that awareness, you're able to, quiet the mind, and you're able to do it without psychedelics. It can be your embodied state where you can start to feel that oneness. I haven't felt it, like at a say a deep level yet. There's still like a belief that's there for me that or I believe that this everything is one. But it does feel like that's where my journey with meditation is going, where it's like I'm seeing glimpses of that more and more, and starting to feel this oneness. And I'm curious what at least my belief with consciousness is that it is our awareness is that consciousness, the part of us that is just kind of formless and just aware, the space that we have just to be aware of things. Is that similar to your belief of what consciousness is? Or what are the qualities of this consciousness that we all have?
Well, I think there's pure consciousness, and which is just uh, for us being aware that we're aware. But
Mm.
I think that mindfulness helps us practice being. I don't believe in higher consciousness per se. I think that's very hierarchical, sort of patriarchal, and colonial in thinking. But I do think that there's expanded consciousness. And I think that you can be more conscious, and you can be more conscious by practicing mindfulness. And that just means not being in your head, thinking about the future or the past, and being engaged with what's happening in front of you. And when you do that, I believe that you're actually more conscious of what's happening around you. If you see what's happening outside of you and you're not stuck in your head thinking about what could happen or what's already happened, and just engaging with the world, including with your senses, because your body's a part of that, then you're conscious of what's happening in the moment. And the more you can do that, in my mind, the better.
Yeah, totally. It's kind of like not being just being conscious and aware, but not being like so attached. If you're attached to a thought, you're going to be letting the thought drag you wherever it goes.
Right.
Same thing with an emotion. Like if you're attached with it, you can be, and then if your mind is also involved, you can be having some resistance and some sort of labeling of what this is. But the pure consciousness is just experiencing it. Be like, okay, there's a thought. That's just a thing that popped up. There's something I see. There's an emotion, and kind of seeing that none of these things are you. These are just things that you are experiencing as consciousness,
Yeah.
and not having the attachment. Yeah. Beautiful. Maybe in my next, I was actually thinking about, I haven't decided yet, but I might be doing a mushroom journey with a friend. He's also a facilitator. And yeah, recently I've been thinking about doing a journey with actually the intention of wanting to connect deeper with God, and seeing some more truth of what is, which yeah, I've never had that kind of more open intention before. And he was also saying we can do breath work during it, which he does during his journeys. And I mean, breath work alone can give you these kind of experiences, these like out of body or these elevated levels of consciousness experiences. So, have you ever done that with like breath work and mushrooms?
Yeah. Yeah. Quite powerful.
Cool. And any tips on that? Like what type of breath work do you do during it?
Well, I've done several different kinds. Whatever resonates with you. I don't believe in picking one kind.
Cool. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna feel into it and see if that feels aligned.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to really stick with at least for me, I tried to do them whenever they feel called to actually do it, and not yeah, kind of not force it.
Nice.
Beautiful. Well, I think people listening got a ton of information about psychedelics, what it's right for, and also yeah, shedding some light that it's not right for everybody. It's you have to be willing to face some discomfort and be okay with that. So if you're not willing to face that, then yeah, maybe right now is not the time, or maybe never is the time for you. And yeah, we went through how people can create an intention, and yeah, creating a specific intention. And for me, that's been so important, the intention setting process, because again, like literally every intention I've ever set with mushrooms, I've got like exactly that. It never happened in the way that I expected it to. It
Yeah.
shows me this like during the trip, it's like sometimes I'm like, this has nothing to do with my intention, but then by the end of it, it makes complete sense, and it's completely has to do with my intention.
Usually what happens.
So
Yeah.
So what I kind of think is set the intention and then just surrender, let go, let the medicine show you um, what it needs to show you.
Yes,
And
indeed.
then yeah. And then the integration process is so important. Like the real work is done after, right? The medicine is just a tool to give you these insights, show you some clarity, and show you what you should change. But then you actually have to have a plan, like a plan of how to actually change it, and you need to actually condition it. And this is why having a coach, an integration coach, can be so helpful to make sure you're actually making those changes instead of just having that heightened, consciousness for a few days, feeling good about it for a little bit, and then obviously you forget about it if you don't have a way to integrate it or a structure. You just start going back to your old neural pathways, your own
Yeah.
behaviors, just who you were before, and then there's really no benefit. And then you just keep doing that in a loop where you just keep taking more and more, but nothing really changes. Awesome. Any final message you'd want to give to our audience about just their journey of how they can use psychedelics to improve their life?
Yeah, if they're planning on it, then there's no one else's path makes sense for everyone. Um,
Mm,
that's what I had to find out about integration for me. It wasn't working for me. Some things that work for other people don't work for you. So you have to feel into
mm.
what works for you. Feel it in your body.
Yeah, so you need to kind of trust your own experience, trust what you're experiencing in your body, lean into that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, beautiful. And if people want to learn more about you, potentially work with you, or maybe do you have any resources you can share,
Yeah, you
where
can
should
find
they
me at
go?
Greg Lawrence. Greg Lawrence on Facebook, and you can find me at greglawrencecoach.com online.
Awesome. I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. All right.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Greg. It was a pleasure speaking to you today.
Same here, Alex. Thanks.
Thank you guys so much for sticking with us till the end of this episode. If you liked the episode, please leave a review on whatever platform you're listening to. It makes a huge, huge help for us. So please do that. We have some amazing people already lined up for the next several podcasts. So you definitely want to stay tuned for that. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.